guys, thank you so much for joining us again at the OTWO Pod. So following on in season 1, we are doing the focus on building greener businesses. And today we have ISOLAS joining us. Thank you so much, guys. We have Giovanni and Katrina from ISOLAS. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Honestly, what we're doing here, and as we were explaining in other episodes, is that we're trying to inspire and encourage other companies similar to your industry, which is going to be for administration and lawyers and everything else, which they'll be explaining a lot further. But to try and encourage other companies to do something similar. And obviously, we can all fall into the same trap on trying to do things and maybe making similar errors. But I'm guessing you guys have been around
since 1892.
1892. So yeah. I'm sure that you guys have a lot of backbone, especially with your ESGs, and I know that you guys are very, very focused on this. So if you don't mind, we can start with introducing yourselves and what you do with the company, how long you've been for ISOLAS for.
Sure, I'm Katrina Isola, working at ISOLAS, and I specialise in private client and conveyancing and property matters. I started 2018. And yeah, those are my main areas of focus, and I've been working with Giovanni ever since I started ISOLAS, because you were there before, no?
See, I think I must have been the intake the year before, and hi, I'm Giovanni Origo. I work with Katrina at ISOLAS, and we've been sharing the conveyancing department, so we kind of share now the similar practice area. And I'm also the youngest member in Parliament here in Gibraltar, and I have the shadow portfolio of the environment. So
amazing.
One of my prerogatives is to hold the government account on environmental matters, and I also form part of the Select Committee on the Environment, which is made up of 3 members of the government and 2 on the opposition.
Brilliant. I knew your name sounded familiar. Brilliant. So, we have 2 very, very, experienced people here. So I thank you guys again for coming. So how long has ISOLAS, we said that ISOLAS has been since 1892. That is a long time. But we can also understand that sustainability as a topic has not been in the forefront since the beginning. Again, it's something that we are growing and developing as a species, as communities and worldwide. So how have you guys found this transition, and when did you think ISOLAS started looking into sustainability as a main
So
issue?
we're discussing some of this earlier, and I think the genesis point must have been on around the 2019, where we had the Gibraltar Climate Change Act come into legislation, and that came about due to international global movements and pressures in light of the COP events which are being held globally, and the trends moving towards sustainability. So when that was legislated in Gibraltar, it basically gave companies, businesses, persons an obligation to be more environmentally focused, and I think that basically gave us the obligation to, so then we started looking at that more in depth.
Yeah, so it was already in the background, let's say, when I started, but I've definitely found that the sustainable movement, let's say, in the firm is definitely much more proactive the last few years, and I think that's just because of the way everyone is moving forward. Everyone now has more knowledge, and knowledge is power, and understand the importance of
the impact
that they have on the environment. Exactly. So although it's been around, I guess it started around circa 2016, we're definitely improving and becoming much more involved.
That's brilliant. That's honestly brilliant. So what did you guys start off with? So 2016 is when you started really researching, really looking into this. And what were the first things that you thought, right, we need to start somewhere? Because we were saying it before, right? When you start anything, it becomes very daunting.
Of course.
How do you feel that you guys started this journey?
I think Gio's a bit more appropriate to answer this question, as I wasn't quite at ISOLAS at that time.
I think the first point of call with respect to what we did at ISOLAS was to set up the ESG committee, and basically we put it out there to individuals in the firm who had an interest in environmental or social governance aspects and wanted to form part of this committee that would be able to consider the firm and its impact, its footprint, its effect on the wider community, and how we could do stuff internally to improve that. one of the first things that the ESG committee decided was to have an external audit from a professional company here in Gibraltar to assess what we as a firm were doing by way of our carbon footprints, our emissions, and where we could focus our efforts to have the largest impact. And that basically gave us a really good steer on what changes we could do.
Yeah.
And where to focus on, and which areas were going to have the biggest impact and which areas were going to be a bit more challenging. So with those two functions, having set up the committee and then having had the assessment, we had a really clear idea of, okay, this is what we're going to try and do in the next couple of years to have an improvement on our credentials, essentially.
I believe our audit looks at 3 areas. So area 1 being emissions by vehicle usage and direct company usage. Step 2 is more so in relation to energy saving emissions, and then step 3 is where businesses, it's not their direct emissions but employee emissions, and that's step 3. So I believe that's how the audit process works, to see where we can improve.
And that data we can also then go back to and see year on year how we're doing, what improvements are being carried out.
So you're doing this year upon year,
Yeah.
and then how have you seen the impact? Have you noticed the trend going up, improving slowly?
Yeah, definitely. The percentages seem decreasing, which is positive.
So it means the measures are working.
Exactly.
When you see something in a decline, you kind of think, is this supposed to be something that I'm looking
I've
forward
got to clarify, that's a positive.
That's a positive.
And there were, like, if you look at what small adjustments were made internally, we can talk about kind of small tweaks that kind of came a long way. So for example, in our practice area, we used to use a lot of paper-based printing, and we tried to be more conscious, print double-sided, reduce the amount of paper that we use. We installed light sensors around the office so if people weren't in their rooms, it would turn off.
I did see something that air conditioning units are the most negative common impact on the environment in terms of businesses.
Yeah.
And that it's possible to invest in more eco-friendly air conditioning units, for example, to help your businesses. In terms of the attempt to go more paperless, we invest in technological software that enables us to therefore save emails, contracts, etc. that do not necessarily need to be printed, because that in mind, we work in conveyancing and some deeds do have to be printed and signed by ink. So we can't go completely paperless, but we're moving towards as close as we can get.
I can imagine you guys have probably noticed the trend now with technology, how it's improving and helping everybody, right, become and more efficient in these sort of ways. And I can imagine that by issues with paper, printing papers and printing stuff, signing documents, you can now kind of e-sign stuff, and whereas before things were like, no, you need to have a paper version of it or else it's not accepted.
And it's also just people realising and really understanding that that's now a possibility, being educated that not everything has to be signed and printed and signed, but that you can sign electronically and then you can save that as a PDF version. It does not need to be printed. So again, it's this importance of education.
Yeah, I mean, and again, technology going with the trends, which is in a good way because it's going into the more environmentally friendly way. That's brilliant. Honestly, I think that, so apart from administration and apart from, so you mentioned about employee like vehicle. Have you how did you guys kind of gear towards having employees? Because I can imagine that if somebody's used to coming into work for us in a certain mode of transport, it is somewhat difficult to try and change and encourage and to motivate. Have you guys noticed any trends in that by maybe showcasing, because with the data that you mentioned employee car ownership.
I did see that they look into, I mean, Gibraltar's also quite close, but how many kilometres employees tend to live close to the office or not, and for those that do live within a certain range, to encourage them specifically, not necessarily everybody, to either walk or cycle rather than using obviously a motor vehicle.
But I suppose it impacts people differently. So we have a circumstance where some of our employees come from across the border. So these people live in Estepona and will have to come in their own kind of private vehicles. And those people in our firm live in a walking distance to the office in any respect. So we already walk towards work. already. Some people might live in the southern side of Gibraltar and they might think, okay, who has adopted more of a less dependency on private vehicles and who hasn't? But then some of the factors that might impact this is public transport, for instance, and that kind of like with the parliamentarian hat on, you might say, and there might be something to say if the public transport systems were better improved in Gibraltar locally, then there'd be a higher adoption on use of public transport, because the data right now does say that the uptake compared to previous years is much lower. So I would think that might help go a long way to assist more people to kind of leave their cars at home.
And can help you guys also incentivize your staff to be able to use it, perhaps in any other different way. You know, being private companies and being private industries, we can perhaps try and think of ways that we can incentivize staff to be able to use a different mode of transport, whether it is walking, cycling or public transport. Again, the cycling infrastructure we know needs to be improved so that you can encourage, and it'll be an easier way so that people can get to work and in a safe way, because everybody knows right now with the traffic as well, it can be, when you get peak times, it can't be the most pleasant. So I know that you guys have won some awards in the Nautilus project. Can you guys explain some awards that you've won and the reasons for it?
This was recently a few weeks ago.
Because
they do the yearly awards and we've come up a number of times, and I think the rationale behind that was because of the kind of first mover steps that we've taken in the industry. So to my understanding, I think we're the only law firm in Gibraltar that signed up to the UN Climate Action Now. We also donate monies to Oceana projects. We also donate to UN Climate Initiative projects where we basically adopt animals, we kind of contribute to the cleaning of our oceans, we build kind of rainforests and contribute money to offset our footprints in areas that we can't do so internally. You know, we're talking about how kind of maybe the difficulties of going paperless in some of our practice areas, and some of others might have it easier, but those are kind of the things that put us out there and far above everyone else in our sector. Another thing that we also adopted was a charity day that we offer to all our employees. We have one charity day, I think, a year.
You have one charity day a year, which can be split into
two halves.
Two halves, exactly. Where we encourage employees to clean beaches, or also just from the social point on of ESG, any kind of charitable day for the local community as part of our
way of giving back, essentially.
To the community.
So we've had a couple of years since the adoption of the ESG committee, so we have data on how many people in the office have been uptaking that day, where they've been going to, what they've contributed in, which areas they preferred and why, and we just basically as a firm try to organise that as best as possible. So I think earlier this year we were trying to get a group of 10 or 15 of us to do a beach clean with Nautilus, and some people in the office might like that, other people might want to dedicate the day off to other social initiatives in the community, but I think that's a really nice social governance point that the kind of firm
and it's
took
team
on
building
board.
as well, isn't it? At the end of the day, I think it ticks both boxes. You kind of do something together. You're doing something that's making you happy, worthwhile, as well as looking after the environment, and you have a day off. The
it's
office.
a good way. We send emails, we send reminders, and it's a good way just to encourage people to do something outside of work. It's very easy for us to focus on work and family and everything that we have going on in our lives, and it's just that reminder: take a day off work and let's help our community in whichever way that you personally feel passionate about, not necessarily in what we think is best for the community, but so that employees are encouraged even more so because it's to their passion.
Yeah, I mean, so it can be any charity whatsoever.
Exactly.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So anything that maybe is more, like you say.
So we've had people go to the veterinary, I think, not to kind of maybe assist with dog walkings, because
for the dogs we've had, and
the beach cleans, and people personally have reached out to kind of small businesses to say, okay, I want to help you, is there anything I can do? And as long as it's personal and it's kind of community based and we can record it as being something that we're doing from a social governance perspective, it's fine by us.
Brilliant. That's really, really cool.
So I think all those things together basically helped us kind of win these kind of recent sustainability awards. It's a number of things that kind of we did as a firm, and it wasn't just one initiative. I think that kind of put us
I know
punching for
recently
that.
you guys also have printed off a really cool calendar with regards
yes,
to
all
the
ESG focused.
all is ESG focused, all environmentally focused, which is brilliant because I mean I know it's been given to the community in general. So I mean every month upon month you're influencing and which I think it's an amazing sort of initiative that you guys are taking on that, because I mean you can see it, you can read it, and you can educate people on things that they might not know that's happening locally. So amazing.
There's still areas for improvement. There are always areas for improvement.
Always.
But we are improving.
And it's a start. It's a way to get the conversation going, you know? So like you say, we thought it was appropriate, given the way the international movement is headed. In the past, we've done famous people in Gibraltar, historical figures, etc. We've had a few different variations. Every year has a new theme, and this year, in light of the movement essentially and the legislation and the pushes towards a greener kind of community and society, we thought it was very appropriate to just go with an ESG-based calendar.
It's definitely possible for firms or our industries to evolve by investing in certain software, audit procedures, adopting policies. We have the internet. The internet is very helpful. We have all types of industries that can advise accordingly. So even though the start may seem difficult, it is possible, and we believe that ISOLAS is an example of that.
So what recommendation would you give anyone that's looking into this to start off with?
We'll start with a ESG policy, seeking the right advice to prepare that policy. We'll definitely instruct auditors to see exactly where you can improve, not to, in terms of waste management. Studies, exactly. Encourage recycling in the offices. Introduce new software and have strict guidelines on when you can print and when you can't. The majority being you shouldn't be printing unless absolutely necessary. Changing one's there's a lot of resistance now in our field because everyone's used to the traditional methods that surrounds the legal industry. So it's just educating those and changing the mentality really of the firm and of certain employees, incentivizing employees.
I would think one thing I might throw in there is set up a ESG committee.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
have a body internally in
even
the
if
firm.
it's just the one person because it's a small startup or whatever, but just one person to have that as a responsibility, and then those people grow, and then.
Importantly, I think if it is just more than one person, try and get kind of senior level buy-in also. I think it's very important to have higher management to kind of be made aware, to have an understanding of this and to see how this works. This is kind of the direction and trajectory we're headed, and also be able to convince them, and we believe that sustainability will kind of pay off eventually. And I think
this is a question I wanted to ask you guys actually, because I mean I have a conversation with many people with regards to this. Do you guys feel that your clients are receptive more towards you guys because of your ESG goals and because of your focuses and the responsibility that you're taking on this?
large businesses, international companies, massive players, all are receptive to our ESG kind of policies and movements. And I say this because many of them are also listed. Stock exchanges are public companies. They have corporate social responsibilities which they need to kind of abide by. And as a client of theirs, or one of the things that kind of also kicked us off was, for instance, we have a client that's part of a massive player in the big legal sector in their own kind of market, and they basically assessed us as a supplier because we gave legal services to them and said, what's your performance like? So then that basically lit a light bulb saying, okay, this is where the movement's headed. This happened a few years ago, and we since then set up the ESG committee, assessed ourselves, said this is how we're doing, because our supply chain was now obligated to assess us to say, no, you have to take into consideration ESG principles as part of the metrics of whether someone is going to supply to your business or not, because they're publicly listed.
I also find that private clients and high net worth individuals seem to be more interested in sustainable investments and therefore are attracted to us and to our firm specifically because of our ESG commitments. So it is attractive to both corporate companies that have to adhere to the Companies Act and certain policies, as well as individuals who are just moving forward with the whole sustainable.
Believe in the
It makes
ideology.
good
Yeah.
business sense.
Exactly.
It makes good business
good
sense
for our
because you can see that
reputation.
that's the way the world is going. So it's
Yeah.
brilliant to hear it. Guys, anything else?
So
Anthony?
like even kind of from a cost kind of analysis perspective, I think we had a few PowerPoints here which cover the metrics and how well we performed. So if we reduced our electricity expenses by 10 to 20% in the last 2 years, that's going to be cost saving long term. If we the same with our air conditioning, the amounts of paper that we're not printing and the amount of ink we're not buying to print on these papers, cost saving. So even though at the beginning it might seem like it has a startup cost, and we're spending time, hours, higher level, lower level management, and we're all kind of contributing to this. But in the long term, it does, I think, pay off because we've seen it ourselves.
It's what I think Galito, one of our first people who hired,
Yes.
we interviewed him. He was one of our first guys that we interviewed for the OTWO Pod, and he came up with the first thing that said, sustainability equals profitability.
Yeah.
And it does. I mean,
Yeah,
at the end of the day,
completely
it's
agree.
assessing what you do from day to day. It can take a bit of time, and it is time consuming, but at the end, you will become more profitable because of it, because it makes business sense.
It's also better for retention of employees, I find, and recruitment nowadays, especially with the younger generation, because sustainability is at the forefront of their minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. And yeah, so the more environmentally conscious and centered, and that is appealing to everyone. But of course, as a firm, we just really believe in the movement because it's the right thing to do. So I think we believe it's right to be environmentally conscious. We believe it's the moral thing to do to be socially conscious within your own respective communities. And if everyone does this globally, then we wouldn't have a climate crisis and we shouldn't have a social crisis within our jurisdiction. So I think it's just principally the correct way forward. And if it does pay off, then great. But even if it weren't, I would have still been a firm believer that it's just the right thing to do. But in this occasion, it does pay off. It does have a cost saving. And I think it's a moral way forward. So it's a win-win in all respects.
Brilliant, guys. We'll end with that, I think. Thank you so much for joining us again, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.